don't know. I wonder if he's going to go out that way. I don't know what I'm shooting here. I'm just shooting it right down there. See Brian? Oh, there's Michael. He's in a teal shirt. There's your brother and Michael. Oh my God.
Some notes, and most of you know me well enough, I doubt that I'll be able to keep to them, but I hope I remember everything that I need to remember. And they're Leslie Byrne, Jim Brown, we are honored to have from Prince William County, Jam Jenkins and Hilda Barnes. We have our own supervisor, going with Ed Hanley, Kate Hanley. She's everybody's supervisor, even if she's Providence District. From Arlington, we have Mary Margaret Whipple, Jim Hunter, Al Eisenberg, and somebody we might hear about next year's name is Bill Dolan. I don't know who he is. We have Senator Janet Howell, Charlie Waddell, and Joe Gartland. And we have delegates Gladys Keating, Jim Almond, Karen Darner, Toddy Puller, Alan Baird. We have the Secretary of Transportation. Yeah, that's what you are, isn't it, John? Secretary of Transportation. Anyway, we can thank him enough. He is our senator. I'd now like to take the opportunity to let us hear from Tipper Gore. We've known her. She's not a stranger to us.
Thank you, Dottie and Sonny, very much for letting us come and join your crab feast this particular year. I'm delighted to be here with so many friends, people that are neighbors. I mean, I grew up in Arlington. My grandparents built a house in 1938. And, hi, there's Peggy Fisher. How are you? Yes, and my children went to Oak Ridge School just like I did, and the crossing guard, Mrs. Stump, is going to our church now, and she worked with them. Anyway, there's a lot of roots and continuity that I feel here in this community. And I'm delighted to be here with all of the dignitaries and elected officials, I would like to say a word about my good friend Linda Robb. Come up.
Balanced 11 budgets, but I'm not going to do that. He brought real education reform to the state of Arkansas. You know that! What we're really interested in today is his vision for the future and how to make our fellow citizens' lives better, because right now, many people, many families here in Arlington, in Virginia, all around the nation, are really suffering. It is not right that 1 in 4 children are falling into poverty. And Bill Clinton cares about this. I've gotten to know him since my husband was chosen to be the vice presidential nominee. I've gotten to know Bill and Hillary from New York on to right here today, and I can tell you it has been a real pleasure and a real honor to be able to serve with them, to create a public trust with you, and to talk about an America that can do so much better for our children. And I want to tell you about Bill Clinton as a father. Many people may not know, and he's not going to tell you this himself, but I remember even in New York when we were at the convention with our family, and he was there with Hillary and Chelsea. One evening, he came down, he had her by the hand, and he was in jeans, and he just strolled into our suite, and Chelsea started talking with my 13-year-old Sarah, and they were talking about, well, what are we going to do about the Secret Service, and that and the other thing. And here was Bill, you know, just easy with her. They obviously have such a great relationship and such love. And when we're out on the bus tours, he's the one. He calls her a couple of times a day, and I overhear him say, well, now you got to get ready for your recital, your ballet recital, or have you done all your work, or what are you going to do? How was camp last week? He is a very loving, caring parent and father, and that, to me, is a very important qualification for being the President of the United States. Once again, he has one of his own that he cares so much about. So it's an honor and a pleasure to give you someone who feels deeply for people, who is compassionate, who is caring, who is a loving person. And I mean that he loves his fellow man. And he needs to be in a position where he can affect the world and our nation for good. I'm delighted to introduce to you the next President of the United States, Governor Gore.
Thank you very much. First, I want to thank Dottie for letting me crash her 25th anniversary party. I've always been reluctant to crash parties ever since I once went to an Easter egg hunt uninvited when I was 5, and I was, you know how you hide eggs when you're kids, you know, they pretty well put them out in the open, and I was the fattest kid there, and I didn't get a single egg. I never got over it. But I'm glad to be here today, and I'm glad to be here with you. And I appreciate you so much and your long devotion to the Democrats of Virginia. I also want to say a word about, yeah, give her a hand, that's right. I also want to say a word about Tipper. You know, when I put Al on the ticket, by the way, you know, George Bush says this election's about trust. There's only one decision we've made in common, and mine was Senator Gore. But anyway, you know, people say, well, one good thing about Gore is you'll never frustrate him. You know, you'll never fluster him. And he's becoming a much better public speaker, and goodness knows he is. but you will never fluster. The other night, Gore's on Larry King, and just, did you hear it? This incredible voice calls and says, "You are such a wonderful looking man, would you go out with me?" He says, "King, how dare you? I'm a married man, I'm in the middle of a national campaign." She said, "Al, it's temper." So for one brief moment, his unshakable cool was shattered by his own wife. And I called him out on that later that night, and I said, "You know, I know a lot of people would be glad to take you to dinner if he won't." It was great. I want to tell you how much I have appreciated getting to know Tipper and Al Gore and their children. And they really do represent what's best about this country. We've had a wonderful time on these bus tours. There's a lot of time in between stops, and you talk about everything in the ride world and everything your kids have ever been through and everything you went through as a kid and all this sort of stuff. And it occurs to me that we may have set a new standard for the appropriate way for people who run for president and people who run for vice president to get to know each other, because normally what happens is you pick somebody to run with you, and then you go out and campaign, you don't see them until after the election, and you've got to sit down and figure out how to put a good government together with someone who may be a virtual stranger. And that will not be a problem. And I just want you to know how much I admire both of them and how proud I am to be a part of it. I want to say that I wish Hillary and Chelsea were here today, but they went to New Mexico to register voters on an American Indian reservation. That's what they're doing. Those of you who got those Hillary fan club buttons, I like those. Hillary and I went to Notre Dame yesterday, and I gave a speech there. And, thank you. And it was amazing. The thing that it didn't really get reported, but the biggest ovation came for Hillary because they had these folks, a few of them out in the crowd that were going to demonstrate against her. So when they started to boo when she was introduced, the others just sort of flipped out and stood up and cheered for her for 5 minutes. It's going to make my life a lot better for the next week or two. I love it. I want to say, too, a special word about my good friends Chuck and Linda Robb. Linda and Hillary worked together in common on problems of child welfare and trying to reduce infant mortality for years. We went once to Taiwan together and had a wonderful time. The four of us that I will always remember. Senator Robb, is he blushing yet? Senator Robb, the four of us went to a great dinner. You know, the Chinese always try to get you to drink rice wine until they see who stops. I stopped last, I'll fess up. Chuck Robb invited me to give the speech to the Jefferson-Jackson Day dinner in Virginia in 1985. That's when Mary Sue was nominated to be Attorney General. And right before Doug Wilder was nominated to be Lieutenant Governor, it was right before my good friend Jerry Baliles was nominated to be Governor. It was a great evening. And I knew then the Virginia Democrats were coming back because there were so many of them there. I was stunned by it. But I want to say how much knowing them has meant to me over the years, and what wonderful friends that they've been to Hillary and to me, and how if you know people over a long period of time, you get a chance to be their friends when you're up, when you're down, and all kinds of things are happening, and I just think they're terrific, and I'm glad to be here with them. And I also want to say that maybe the best rally we've had in this campaign was in front of the LBJ Library in Austin, Texas, the other day. On the occasion of the honoring President Johnson's 83rd birthday, is that right? And we had, I don't know, 25,000, 30,000 people there. As far as the actual people were sitting up in the trees and everything. It was so crowded. Barbara Jordan spoke, and Linda's mother and her sister came, and it was a wonderful, wonderful day. And I raised that to point out that the last Democrat who carried the state of Virginia was Lyndon Johnson, and I would like to have a Lieutenant Governor Don Byers here somewhere, and I want to thank him. Where are you? Raise your hand. There he is. And I want to thank Congressman Moran for being here. And your heavily supported candidates, Leslie Byrd and Ray Vickery. I would like to remind you all that if in 52 days I do in fact become the next President of the United States, this country still has very great challenges facing it, very difficult problems. And we will need a level of cooperation and national unity we've not had to muster in a very long time to make serious progress. And I did not recognize these candidates and this member of Congress in vain. It is very important that you have not only a president who will not point the finger of blame, but will extend the hand of partnership to Congress, but that you have the right women and men in the Congress who can make a difference for this country. And I hope you will support me. You know, I have felt a certain, almost bewilderment in watching this campaign unfold in the last 2 months. I mean, you know, it's always better to be ahead in polls than behind. I tried it both ways. I tried it both ways on election day, and I can tell you for sure how it worked. But I've been going across this country for a year now. After I got into this race when Mr. Bush was at 70% of the polls, even my sweet mama didn't think I could win. But I got in because I believed that at the end of the Cold War, our country was facing a series of profound challenges in which economic competition will, we all hope, replace military competition as the primary form of human conflict. We all hope that. The United States had the duty to maintain a world-class national defense and to lead the world to a more peaceful state, but at the same time to recognize that in many ways we were not competing very well against the great titans of Germany and the rest of Europe and Japan and the emerging countries of Asia, and that we really had to figure out where we were out of line with the world in which we were living and the world toward which we were moving. We had to find a way, in short, to make the American dream live again, to make people able to live up to the fullest of their God-given potential, which meant that we had to reorganize our economy so that we could grow more rapidly like other countries, which meant that we had to intensify and broaden our education efforts because we live in a world where what we earn depends on what we can learn, and we were not doing a very good job of developing the capacities of all of our people. It meant that we had to face certain thorny problems that other societies had come to grips with that we had long avoided, like how to provide basic health care to all Americans and keep it within inflationary. It meant that we had to stop living on borrowed money and borrowed time and recognize that we only create growth through investment, and that we were not investing enough in new plants, new equipment, new small business, and research and development, and transferring technology from the laboratory to the workplace, and in building up the transportation and communication systems that make a country grow, enrich, and common. It meant that we had to recognize that we had an almost overwhelming job to increase investment and at the same time to bring down this horrendous deficit, which is now at astronomical levels. And it meant that at the same time we had to recognize that there are a lot of people just plain old hurting out there in this country. More people in poverty, most of them little kids. More people working and in poverty. A scourge of AIDS sweeping across the country. Over 1 million Americans now HIV positive. All kinds of Americans from all walks of life, lamentably getting it in different ways. every day. It meant that we had to sort of pull together and push ahead. I knew that. We were in Texas the other day. Senator Lloyd Vincent got in the bus with Hillary and me and Alan Tippert. He looked at me and he said, "I think you're going to win this thing." And that's when the problems really started. I know I do not have all the answers, but I have worked hard for a dozen years in trying to understand what the problems are, what the opportunities are, what the challenges are, and where we ought to go. And I have done my dead-level best to lay before the American people, working with Senator Gore, a real plan that would lift the American people up and put the American people first. Treat everybody fairly. I don't want to go back to tax and spend, but I know we can't stay with trickle down. I want to create more millionaires than Bush and Reagan, but I want them to do it by putting the American people back to work and raising the income of hard-working Americans. What is bizarre about this environment is the response that these plain problems and the clear message the American people have evoked from the other side. I mean, the American people, broken and in so many ways. The greatest country in the world still, with people, millions of us getting up every day not believing that tomorrow will be better than yesterday was. Plain jobs there before us, and they spend the first 2 nights of their convention attacking my wife. I told old Bush, you know, I said in public, I'll say it again, if he wants to run for First Lady, he ought to file for the job. Mr. Bush is always talking about experience. Now, that's nothing I have experienced, and if he thinks he's winning that argument, he's got another thing coming. Then they talked about how we needed a religious war and how we weren't real Americans. And they used this old family values thing as a wedge. You know, I'll tell you something. I value families, and I wake up every day thinking about your family. And that's what you need in the White House. Somebody who wakes up every day thinking. In August, he goes out, folks, to the American Legislative Exchange Council, this group of state legislators, and says, here's the way we ought to cut the deficit. And he waves his book around, you know. Had a lot of fine print. I don't think anybody but read the fine print. But the fine print said, add another $400 a year for 5 years to the Medicare cost of the average elderly person, no matter making a $20,000 income. Fine print said take another 1.2 million disabled veterans off the disability roll. Fine print said add another $2,000 in interest cost to 3 million kids going to college today on student loans. Now, you know, that's so we can finance not only the debt we got, but his new promise of an across-the-board tax cut for everybody. Heavily tilted toward upper-income people who get 60 times as much benefits as middle-class people. Now, that's not fair, but the real problem is it's not only not fair, it won't work. It failed. We tried that for 12 years. 12 years ago, we had the highest wages in the world. We're down to 13th and dropping. 12 years ago, we were the world's creditor. Now we're the world's biggest debtor. 12 years ago, we at least were competitive in the amount of money we're investing in building an economy for the future. And now every major country invests a higher percentage of their income than we do in building their economy. And 9 nations now invest a higher percentage of their income in kindergarten through 12th grade education. Did you know that? That's amazing, isn't it? And so then he goes around and says, I'm for cutting all this stuff. And then they don't move in the polls. So what does he do? He goes to Michigan, or sends Quayle to Michigan, and says they're going to modernize a tank. They've been refusing to modernize with money Congress has already given them, as if they just pull that money out of the track. Then he goes to South Dakota and tells the wheat farmers he's going to give them money to export wheat for a program that a month ago he came out for abolishing, under money that Congress has already provided. Then he goes to Texas and tells them we're going to sell planes to Taiwan. He was against selling because he never wants to do anything that makes China mad. Because he saw that we were still winning in Texas, even after the Republican convention. He says, you know, I'll tell you all about these cuts later. Trust me, till January. This is amazing. So basically, he's running as a tax and spend liberal, giving everybody everything they want. Just does this money out, you know. It's like he's dealing the blackjack and giving everybody 21 every time he turns around, right? Talking the conservative rhetoric, waiting for the election so he can put the hammer down on ordinary Americans to try one more time trickle-down economics by giving tax cuts to the wealthiest of us and having no strategy to invest, to convert our defense cuts to domestic job growth, to educate the American people, to solve the health care crisis, to bring the budget down, to do those things which will guarantee not only that we can maintain our leadership in the world, which he says is important to him, but that we can keep the American dream alive at home. And I want you to help me for 52 days keep people focused on the realities and the challenges and the problems and the opportunities. Will you do that? Very hopeful. I think people are pretty smart. And Tipper, as you may know, is a very gifted photographer, and when we go to these big crowds, she's always out there taking pictures of the best signs. And we have seen some wonderful signs, and most of them can be put in her photography book after the campaign. Not all, but most of them. But after Mr. Bush spoke to the Republican convention and said, well, we got a $400 billion deficit, vote for me and I'll cut everybody's taxes. There was this great sign the next day that said, we're not buying it this time, George. It was great. Did you see, the other day, no, don't throw them in the crab pot. Isn't it interesting when they cheer, though, they never do tell you. And the Republicans, it's interesting what they kept a secret. They talked about taxes, and they talked about how pure Bush was on taxes, and they didn't tell you Arkansas had the second lowest tax burden in the country. They talked about how bad my record was. They didn't tell you we ranked first in the country this last year in job growth. They have to scream and shout you down because they can't run on their record, they can't run on their vision, they don't know what to do. Right? I just want to say one last thing about this crazy campaign. Did you see the other day, the president was at one of these rallies and he said, I'm never going to let the Congress sucker me again into raising taxes. They made me do it. Remind you of those old speeches, the devil made me do it, I didn't want to do it. What do you expect? I'm just the president. He said, I'll never do it again. Never, never, never. Did you see him? And then that evening, Marlon Fitzwater said that was not a pledge. Well, it's our responsibility to bring the reality back into this campaign and to bring the hope back into this campaign. Sure. And to keep people's vision on the future. This country is full of wonderful people. Democrats, Republicans, Independents, people get up every day and do the very best they can. And they deserve better. We are better than this. We are better than this. And we can do better than this. young woman on this walkway said to me on the way up here, she said, I haven't voted before. I didn't even know if I believed anybody enough to vote for them, but I believe in what you're trying to do. That made my day. That's what keeps us just going. That's what keeps us going. For all of you who have been loyal to the Democratic Party all these years, for all of you who've been disappointed when Virginia became more and more Republican, remember now, a clear majority of Americans in every state know we cannot go on for 4 more years in the direction we're going. They know that. And so, this is my challenge and this is your challenge. They know we can't go on for 4 more years, so the only way we will not prevail is if, one more time, we become diverted or divided or distracted. If one more time we allow fear to dominate hope, if we allow the comfort of today and tomorrow to overcome the urge to change, if we keep mired in the past instead of seizing the future. This country's been around for more than 200 years, and this state did more to get this country started than any other state. Because every time we had to have the courage to change, we did it. And when you get discouraged about the depth of our problems, imagine this. Do you really think what we face today is worse than what George Washington faced when the other people in the colonies were saying, we don't want to be a country, we don't want to be united, we want to print our own money, we want to have our own army, we want to do this. You can't imagine, why would we want to be one country? Why would we want to let somebody else tell us what to do? And somehow he found the vision and the strength with Mr. Jefferson and a lot of other people to bring this country together. It was a miracle when it happened, folks. We take it for granted now. It was a miracle. Can you imagine that what we face today is more profound than the crisis Abraham Lincoln faced when the finest military commander of his generation, Robert E. Lee, went home to Virginia, and the country was going to be torn apart by something. And he literally gave his life for the Union, that 3 of his wife's brothers died trying to separate. Or when this country was raised from the depths of depression by Franklin Roosevelt chained to his wheelchair. I mean, we have been through rougher times than this. What is hurting us now is the dimension of our disbelief. And if you can bring belief and hope and conviction back into this country, and back into this state, we can carry Virginia and change America. Thank you.
All the good because of how long you work for.
What about Jack? Do you remember first year? He wrote me a letter, and he was know. He said it was the first time he called me. Good luck to you. That's a win.
Hey folks, let's move away from the house. Thank you. Move away from the patio. You won't be able to see anything down here anyway.